So it's been about 5 years since my first game in C++. Ever since then, I've been making 2 or 3 games per year, as well as some tools related to game development. So in this video, I'll show my major projects over the years and talk a bit about why the project exists in the first place and what I've learned from it. Anyways, that is all from me. I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. The year is 2019, and after a bit of Python and C#, I've decided to start learning C++. Why? Well, I was interested in computer graphics, and I've heard C++ is fast and commonly used in game development. And this is the BBC Microbit. We had these in school, and I made a game for it. It is a very simple maze game. I mean, the board has a single color 5x5 screen, so it can't be complicated. And this is BROX, a PC version of that game made in C++ in the second half of 2019. I even have some videos of it. I never published this game since it had some sounds which I don't have permission to use, but it sure was my first C++ game. Then I discovered the simple and fast multimedia library, also known as SFML, and I've been using it ever since. I'd say 95% of my projects in the last 5 years use SFML in some way. I recently also made a contribution, but we'll get to that. This simple program consisting of 2 sprites is my first ever SFML project all the way back in 2019. I honestly have no idea if I wanted to make something specific or was it just messing around with the library, but yeah, I just have images. I never finished it. It's 2020, and with a new decade come new challenges. I wanted to mess with graphics in SFML, but still knew almost nothing about C++. I specifically remember using global variables and trying to either construct a vector2f or cast the data into a vector2f. I was using whichever one worked. Since my knowledge was low, my options for what game I could make were very limited. I decided to try to make a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, since I'm a big fan of that series. The game name would be Six Nights at Penny's, or Snap for short. I started the project in February, to be more precise, on 10th of February 2020. 1 month later, the pandemic started, and therefore I had more time to work on the game. And after 3 months of hard work, the project was complete in May. Fun fact, Snap was originally keyboard only, since I had no idea how to check collisions with the mouse. 1 month later, I released Snap 2.0 with mouse controls. By today's standards, I consider this game a quite literal PowerPoint presentation. From the look of the game, you can clearly see that I heavily relied on things I knew how to do, taking pictures with my phone and applying basic filter effects. I used images for every single thing possible, even if it wasn't very efficient. Less code I had to write, the better. In total, it was almost 3,000 lines of code, which I considered a lot at that time. And it was unfortunately all in a single file. After that, summer came, and with it I wanted to make a new, better project. And that was the first time I overestimated my knowledge. This is Project Cause, a game I never finished. I even made a video about it.
It's an issue, boy.
Okay, shut up now. It should have been a top-down shooter, but my skills just weren't there yet. It required collision, pathfinding, bullets, too many things I never made. So after a week of work, I just cancelled it. At this point, I tried Unity for a few days, even though it is C# and not C++. There I made this unfinished project, which you might recognize from a more recent project of mine. In the end, I decided to come back to C++ and SFML. The next project was called Bigigames, and oh boy, I was proud of that name. From the name you can tell that I thought naming a game with minigames, Bigigames, was cool. This unfortunately turned out to be another cancelled project, but it was very close to being finished. The idea was to make a game with many minigames all separate from each other, and then you could choose what you want to play. So then I started making minigames, if I remember correctly, one every 2 days. The fourth game was really fun to make. It is basically a top-down shooter game similar to what I wanted to achieve with Project Cause. This was also when I bought my first game controller and added support for it. This should have been it, but no, I decided to add a second page with more minigames. Quickly I made minigames 5, 6, 7. The 8th would be my last one, so I wanted to make it special. The idea was a real-time strategy game with units and buildings. The scope was again way too large, but here you can see how it looks like after many days of work. Same as with the Unity game I mentioned, you might recognize some parts of it being used in a more recent project of mine. So yeah, this project was never finished, but it was really close, so I published the latest version on my itch page. Just keep in mind that I still didn't know how to properly close the game if someone did a Alt F4, so please don't do that. It will close but run in the background. Now we're somewhere in November, and this is when I bought the C4Droid app from the Google Play Store. The app doesn't seem to be downloadable anymore, sadly. I contacted the developer, but I didn't get any response. I wanted to port Snap over to Android, and since back then there weren't any up-to-date tutorials on how to set up SFML on Android on PC, I saw this as the only option. The app can use SFML and it works very well, but I did have to rewrite a big part of my code. Why? Well, I used global variables in the project and that came back to haunt me. So yeah, don't use global variables. Eventually I got it to work, but it was a lot of troubleshooting and testing on a physical Android device, so no Visual Studio, code editing or debugging breakpoints, anything like that. I wouldn't want to go there ever again. And to close off 2020, I decided to make my first tools for game development in December. These were the particle editor and 2 days later the tilemap editor. These programs were made quickly and the priority was that it works, even if updating it and adding features might be a pain later on. 2021. This year is still the year with most projects. 2 days into the new year, I created a project with the name Tower Defense. This game would use my newly made tools for particles and tilemaps. I remember when I made 90% of the game and had white circles as enemies going around the map, thinking, what should the enemies look like? I ended up reusing some assets from that Unity game I never finished, and that is how cookies became the main antagonist and how the game name was changed to cookies. I ended up adding local multiplayer and an endless mode to the game, which quickly became the game mode everyone would most enjoy playing. I've learned many things with this project. First of all, particles easily make the game higher quality. Multiplayer was also a new thing for me, and while it wasn't perfect, it showed me how important is thinking in advance what the game will support. It also helped me understand the math behind shooting bullets, rotation, collisions, and many other things. I'd say this is my first modern game. It was my first full screen game, and I don't consider Snap full screen since you play at 800 by 450 pixels on any monitor. It does not allow you to play at your monitor resolution. While making cookies, I also made a few other projects. In February, I made Map Editor 2, which doesn't use tilemaps but just positions of sprites. That was a waste of time since to this day I still haven't used that tool in a single project. I also made Cookie Mania, which is just a challenge to see if I could join a game jam and make a game quickly. It was made in 4 days. Somewhere around this time I heard about OpenGL, so I played around with it a little bit. And I remember not being able to understand what does GL rotate F do, since I was used to object-oriented programming. So my question was like, what is it rotating? Since parameters are just how much to rotate, I couldn't figure out what is the thing that is being rotated. Now I know that you have to throw matrix multiplication into the mix, but back then I've never heard of the term matrix multiplication. Anyways, I stopped there and made a new project with SFML. This was a few months of just killing games. I guess it's a time for a speedrun. In May, I made a platformer game where the idea was that you build parts of the level based on some rule and then play through it. Therefore, I named it Build and Run. It wasn't far into development when I decided this just wasn't it. That was the first and last time I tried to make a platformer game. After that, in June, I made a project by the name of Project Farm. It was supposed to be a mobile game where you plant crops and then sell them to buy new types of crops, and so on. After that, I played with Perlin Noise and created and killed another game, Project Minecraft. And to end my killing spree, I made a project called Sticky Mess. It was supposed to be a puzzle pong-like split-screen game, but also never finished. Speedrun complete. This might be a world record, I'm not sure though. Anyways, then I joined a game jam, but not any game jam, Bracky's game jam. It was quite fun. In 7 days I made a full top-down shooter game. Out of 1,710 submissions, I was overall 704th. After the jam, I continued polishing the game, so in total there are 5 versions. I added achievements, local multiplayer on a single computer, more power-ups, and in the end, a Halloween version. Local multiplayer works with multiple controllers being connected to the same computer, and then everyone is on the screen. There is either the versus mode or the co-op mode, and to this day I still sometimes play this with my friends. I always thought, and still think, multiplayer on a single computer with multiple controllers is extremely fun. I might make a game with this feature again soon, I don't know. During November, I started working on a sequel to my tower defense game called, get this, Cookies 2. And it was an ambitious project. To this day, I still think this game is the most complex game I've ever made, both in terms of lines of code and gameplay mechanics. Also, you can notice some similarities between Cookies 2 and that 8th minigame in Bigigames. To end this year, I experimented with OpenGL again and made a program that imports .obj files and a Minecraft clone which was inspired by all those Minecraft in 1 week challenges. We are still in legacy OpenGL territory though, meaning I use OpenGL 1.1, which SFML uses from 1997. Also, I made this program Nutlog, which can create and open SFML projects, though I don't use it now that much. 2022. 2.5 years done, 2.5 left to go. I've never actually said this in a video, but if you like this, you could, subscribe. I've heard some rumors that it's free and that it also glows up whenever I say it. Still not sure about that last one, but oh well. Anyways, where was I? I started the year by extending the framework I made for JustMine. Did I mention that JustMine was that Minecraft clone? I don't think I did. Anyways, yeah, JustMine is that 3D Minecraft clone I made at the end of 2021. And with the new features, I was able to quickly create my first official 3D game called 3 Shots. It was more than just my first 3D game. This was also my first game to run on Linux and my first online multiplayer game. The idea was really simple, a top-down shooter where each player has 3 bullets per round, which allowed me to learn more complicated features of SFML, like online networking. Linux support wasn't straightforward though. up until now I've used Visual Studio's C++ project templates, which log the project to being Windows only even though SFML is cross-platform. Therefore, I had to figure out how to efficiently compile many files through the terminal. My solution? I made a program which tracks all hash includes throughout the project and combines them into a single file. Then I would compile just that one single file. I hate the fact that I programmed that, but hey, it worked just fine. Later on I discovered CMake, which seriously helped. After that project, I started working on Cookies 2 again, and that project was in development all the way from late February until the end of July. I kept adding more and more features, and the release kept getting I was adding more and more features, and the release kept getting pushed back further and further. Damn, was that really that hard? One of those features were cutscenes. My first thought was to use FFmpeg and .mp4 files. However, there weren't any popular up-to-date libraries which work with SFML. Also, it turns out that using FFmpeg in a project requires like 50 megabytes of just DLL files, and considering my largest game at the time was 50 megabytes, I didn't want that. Then I programmed an algorithm inspired by a YouTube video, and I'll get to all of the inspirations at the end, which reconstructs images using shapes. Implementing this algorithm wasn't difficult, it just took a lot of time since everything was being executed on the CPU. I could convert multiple frames at once by multi-threading, but it didn't help much. In the end, there are many new algorithms I've learned with this game, starting from squared, which is what I call this algorithm for cutscenes. I used A*, pathfinding, for units in the game, and the game needed a way to save absolutely everything in a level so that a player can save at any time and load at any time in the future. From all of the challenges, I'd say the last one was the most difficult. It works quite well, but it still sometimes crashes for unknown reasons. Multiplayer was a really requested feature and still is, and although I started working on it, I never finished it due to issues with general project structure not being very friendly for multiplayer. As I mentioned earlier in this video, thinking what the game will support in advance is really important, and multiplayer in Cookies 2 isn't a thing I thought about before starting the project. After Cookies 2, I joined another game jam. This time it was Wowie Game Jam 4.0 by Jonas Tyroller, and it lasted for 4 days. The game I made for the jam goes by the name of Chain Reaction, another top-down shooter, this time with bouncing bullets and asteroids. Just like last time, I continued working on the game after the jam. I added online leaderboards, cosmetics, a boss battle, and many other quality of life changes. This game was my first game that depends on frame times instead of frame rate, which allows for high refresh rate gameplay. Also worth mentioning is, all the way since November 2020, I've been slowly learning about Android and how to develop apps for it, which we'll get back to specifically when it comes to this game. With the game jam out of the way, it was time to work on another new project, and this one wasn't going to be a game. That's right, it was time for a level editor, and not any level editor, Zombies level editor. Mostly you'll hear me just say ZLE instead of the full name. The idea was simple. Ever since I made those tilemap and particle editing tools, I've been using them for everything. The thing is that they are very inefficient and extremely hard to maintain due to the way behind-the-scenes code was written. Also, I've heard about this GUI library that many people use for graphical user interfaces. It turned out to be a really nice library. SLE has a few features. First of all, the original version 1.0 merged two map editor applications I made all those years ago. Then update 1.1 added shader testing. Up until then, I haven't used shaders much. I didn't know GLSL well, and they just straight up weren't supported with SFML on mobile. I wanted to change that, so SLE has real-time shader editing and viewing. Update 1.2 added particle systems, making that old particle editor useless. Eventually, in 2023, I converted Squared to run on the GPU, which significantly increased the speed, and merged it with SLE. And now in 2024, I've added even more functionality like fonts, texts, low-level vertex objects, scripting in Lua, and more. I'm still maintaining this project almost 2 years later, and I'm working on the next big update 1.6. SLE is also the project with which I got 1 silver and 1 gold medal in various competitions. Let's not forget to mention the whole program compressed to a zip is in 2024 a 1.2 megabytes, allowing it to fit on a floppy disk. For everyone not aware, floppy disks commonly have 1.44 megabytes of space. Why did I bother searching for floppy disks? Firstly, it feels really cool to be able to say I have a physical copy of my software. Secondly, I just like mixing modern software and old hardware. Anyways, it is a really cool and fun project, so I'll keep developing it. To end off 2022, I made a quiz program for my English class, which is the first app to use the new SLE particle systems, and I played with modern OpenGL, from where I created another framework for 3D graphics and JustMine 2.0. 2023. Alright, so to start off 2023, I made a DLC for Cookies 2. It added a few new units, buildings, enemies, quality of life changes, bug fixes, levels, and so on. There's nothing special I learned new about programming in that project, except that it is really easy to get lost in a project which is like over 20,000 lines of code. Either way, it was a fun project and a nice game for all of those Cookies 2 fans. After that, I mostly experimented a few months with the Lua scripting language and 3D graphics. That is also when a new 3D first-person game emerged. Since that project is still on hold, more than a year later, I won't talk much about it. The codename of the project is TRTP, which is obviously an abbreviation. Either way, 3D is still complicated for me in 2024, and I first want to create tools for it before doing anything more than a Minecraft clone. This was also when I created Quartz, a Discord rich presence app which allows anyone to see at any time what project I'm working on, how many lines of code it has, and how many times I've compiled it, aka the build number. If you'd like to know more about that, I made a full video, so I'll link that up in the corner. My next project is D-Miner. It is an Android-only puzzle game. Why does it exist? Well, I experimented with some effects and portrait mode. This was the first game to have that shatter effect as the transition animation, and it was also my first game to have my logo as the intro animation. I'd say that animation is quite interesting for a few reasons. Its main purpose isn't really to show off who made the game, as it might seem at first. It doubles as a loading animation. You can tap or click the screen to skip it if the game has loaded behind the scenes. Those 2 seconds that it takes for it to play are usually enough for any device to completely load the game. In case that it takes more than that, I'd say it's always better for the end user to look at least something on the screen rather than a completely black screen. The animation also uses custom shaders if they're available, which is just to show me that shaders are working properly. And the animation requires 0 textures, so there cannot be any issues with the game unable to find some assets in a folder. It does have sounds, but in case it cannot load them, it can still play the animation, and that's the important thing. During the summer of 2023, I further improved my OpenGL skills, worked on some ZLE updates, converted the Square algorithm to use the GPU, and made this interesting app with a friend. This app experiments with compiling and loading custom code at runtime. First, it used Lua to control these cubes, but eventually it turned out to be quite slow, so we switched to C++ and DLLs. The last major project of 2023 is Chain Reaction 2. It is similar to the original, but still has many new changes. Biggest features are definitely local and online multiplayer, addition of power-ups and a bigger map. Behind the scenes, this is when I finally started to use CMake for projects instead of the default Visual Studio templates. I also worked on a floppy version, and I still work on new updates to this day. Since it was the last year of high school for me, there weren't any big projects for the next 6 months, except occasional ZLE updates. 2024! Alright, so the next project is all the way in May, when I slowly started working on my own game launcher that goes by the name of Indigo. The name? Well, the main theme of the app is a mix of purple colors, and I'm an indie developer, hence the first 4 letters. And honestly, I'm so glad I made it. Firstly, it allows me to create posts in the app itself that anyone can quickly find. Secondly, it is extremely fast to open and install. It also has auto updates. But probably the most convenient of them all is how quickly anyone can play any of my games. The main issue I had with itch.io is people just forget how to find my page and download a game. And after they download it, they have to unzip it, and they usually want to move it somewhere out of the download folder. The same process for every single one of my games and every single new update it has. It gets annoying very quickly. Also worth mentioning, by developing Indigo, I've noticed the weird quirks of Windows itself. At the beginning, my app got flagged by Windows as malware, which obviously makes sense. After some time though, that wasn't the case anymore. Right now, if you download and launch Indigo, I'm 99% sure you won't get any warnings that the app might be unsafe. This slightly concerns me, not because of my app, but because of apps that exist out there. Like, Indigo.exe is literally an app that first of all downloads the DLLs needed to run the main launcher window, and then from there you can use it to download games from the server. I honestly did not expect it to stop getting flagged as malware. I found another concerning quirk with Windows while developing the app. At some point I had a bug where the app would be running in the background because I closed the window incorrectly. Knowing that the app is still open, I launched Task Manager and tried to end the task. Well, Task Manager is cool and all, but the app wasn't listed there. In the end, I had to open up Command Prompt and do a taskkill command with the exact file name. I never knew it was so easy to accidentally make the app undetectable by the Task Manager. Anyways, I finished the project by the end of June. Another small project I made is a program which converts an image into Discord emojis. It is just a random idea that turned out to be quite cool. How does it work? Well, first I painfully made a list of emojis and calculated the average color of each one. Then I mapped emojis to the colors of the original image, pixel by pixel. That is basically it. It gives out some fancy results. 2 more months and 2 more projects. Project G is a game made for a Godot game jam. A friend invited me to join the jam just for fun. This of course means I used something that isn't SFML for the first time in a few years. I made a thing in 5 out of 9 days. Other than that, I don't have much to say here. I see Godot as a really nice game engine, but I still prefer SFML. I never talked about why I prefer SFML over everything, did I? I might make a video about that at some point. If you'd like to see that, please comment down below, but this video is already long enough. The latest game I finished is called, get this, Snap Remastered. We're all the way back at the beginning of this mess. Since I mentioned multiple times I consider Snap a PowerPoint presentation, I decided to remake it with today's knowledge. I found the original high-quality photos and even used some unused images. Everything is now in full 4K, making it my most resource-heavy game ever. Over 2 gigabytes of graphics RAM is required. I'm also planning to remake everything in 3D, so yeah, maybe in the future there'll be a Snap Remastered 3D edition. This is where the story ends. It is currently early September, and looking at the script now, this will probably be my longest video ever, even though my last video was also my longest video ever. So the main question now is, where from here? Well, I have many ideas. Currently there are still 2 projects left to finish, or 3 if you count Snap Remastered 3D. There is the Chain Reaction 2 update 1.5, which would be the final update of the whole game. And there's also SLE update 1.6. Recently I also managed to compile SFML for macOS and iOS, so maybe getting an app on the iOS App Store is another step forward. And of course there are many games and sequels waiting to be developed. I won't spoil anything, but it is looking quite fun. Alright, now that the main part of the video is over, I'll go over every single existing video/game that inspired one of my games. There are a lot of them. Most of my games aren't original, they simply exist because I saw something and I made it my own thing. Alright, so from the start. The BBC Microbit game came from this video. I even have the same map this guy created as one of the levels. Snap was obviously inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's. Bigigames has a few inspirations. The mini dungeon minigame was inspired by Danny's Triangle game. Mini puzzle was inspired by Block Drop, an old Flash game. Mini gravity was inspired by Geometry Dash's ball game mode. And that unfinished 8th game was inspired by both Clash of Clans and an old real-time strategy game, Total Annihilation. Cookies 1 was inspired by 2 games. The look was inspired by Radiant Defense, and the tech tree was inspired by Plague Inc. Cookie Mania was inspired by Waffle Mania, also an old Flash game. Project Farm was inspired by Farm Alarm, a Brackeys game. Project Minecraft was obviously inspired by Minecraft, and so were JustMine 1 and 2. Sticky Mess was inspired by Polymars's Twinny Golf. Chaotic Mess was inspired by Jonas Tyroller's video. 3 Shots was inspired by Particular, another Brackeys game. Cookies 2 was inspired by Total Annihilation. Chain Reaction was mostly original, though Asteroids were inspired by the Asteroids game. The squared algorithm was basically a clone of what Sputniks did in his video. And finally, D-Miner was inspired by Crosspix, an old mobile game. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can expect more videos from me soon. I'm not going anywhere, it just takes a while to make long videos like this. I have to write a script, record the voiceover, collect all of the footage, edit everything, and it takes really a long time. This video only includes things I did on desktop with graphics. I've also been messing with Arduino and generally microcontrollers. So if you'd like to see everything I made there, please let me know down in the comments. Also let me know if any one of you uses LE, my level editor, and if you'd like to see a tutorial series, since the last one is not up to date anymore. So that's it. There's a thunderstorm coming, so I have to end it here. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until the next one.